In 1947, six Norwegian guys set out to cross the Pacific on a boat that was far ricketier than anything their Viking ancestors ever used to sail the Atlantic. The purpose of their voyage was to prove an anthropological theory that the natives to the Polynesian islands were not just ethnically and linguistically, but culturally and demographically similar to the people of Peru and South America. And the theory was that they had come to Polynesia from South America by crossing the Pacific on rafts pushed by a certain current. I believe, if I heard this right in the audiobook, that this was the Humboldt current. This is one of the slight downsides of listening to ebooks through Speechify, is that occasionally I might miss a word here and there, especially because I'm listening to these books while I'm working. That's just the way that life goes. But we'll say, central and founding figure of this voyage was a Norwegian man named Thor Heyerdahl, who put this together and kind of led the expedition and then chronicled what happened after the fact, and put it all together based on journal notes and other records that they had to keep throughout this voyage. The book is called KON-TIKI. That is the name of a Peruvian sun god. It was relevant because that was part of the pantheon of gods of the people that he was inspired to emulate with this voyage. This is the kind of thing that I just absolutely love reading about, because it is men that showed extreme passion and boldness and courage to go out and actually research something by getting their hands dirty, by putting their feet on the ground, by doing instead of just studying, saying, hey, we've got this idea, we're going to do a bunch of homework on it, and then we're going to go actually do it to prove it. And boy, howdy, did they do it. The entire voyage was around 100 days, and they were effectively on a balsa wood plank. Not a plank, it was it was 9 logs tied together, a giant balsa wood raft for that time. These were trees that they cut down. They figured, based on some things that they knew anthropologically about the Polynesians, that this was the way to do it. They went down to Peru and used wood from the area, and they got feedback from sailors who were telling them, right from the get-go, not hey, you can't do this, it's going to fail, but this is what you're going to do and this is what's going to go wrong. And I think it's cool that people were supportive of the idea and getting technical into the details as to what would and would not work. For example, the idea of crossing the Pacific at any time of year on a balsa wood raft seems absolutely insane, but they had to not only do it at the right time of year, they had to harvest the wood at the right time of year. And they found this out throughout the voyage, because balsa wood is very absorbent, and they made their raft out of green wood, meaning trees that they had just cut down and then lashed together for this purpose. If they had taken cured balsa wood, that is to say dried balsa wood, it would have sucked up all the water pretty much immediately and then sank. But the fact that they used green wood meant that even though the outer layer, up to a couple of inches thick, absorbed ocean water, once it hit the sap layer, that left the interior of the trees dry and therefore buoyant. I can't remember what type of foliage or plant or roughage or whatever word you want to use. I can't remember what they used to make the cords, to make the ropes that tied the logs together. But I thought it was cool how they learned after the fact, once they did arrive down in Polynesia and they were able to show the natives what their raft was made out of, and they looked at the plants that they had used to make the ropes to tie the logs together, and they were kind of like, wow, you might get one season out of those. Those do not stand up in salt water. What you've got to do is make ropes out of, I think they said coconut, hemp, some kind of hemp rope. They said that will last 5 years in actual saltwater conditions. And this was all just based on experience. This is what these people made their rafts and their boats and their materials out of at the time, and showed them like, hey, this is a process that goes back to time immemorial. This is the way that our ancestors did it, and if you think that they came from South America on a raft like this, they would have had to use this kind of material to do it. So even after having practical success in crossing the ocean for 3 months on a raft made of balsa wood, they still learned from the natives at the other end of it that there was something that they got wrong. And that if they had done it the way the natives actually would have 500 to 1,000 years ago, then they would have had even greater success. I got hints and echoes of the Project Mayflower book that I read. Excuse me, I'm at an intersection here. Which was also a book about a bunch of guys sailing with centuries-old methodology across the Atlantic in this case. And there were a couple of times when Richard Stone cited this book, KON-TIKI, which I already had on my to be read, TBR list, blah. And reading that book made me want to bump this one up. And just listening to the actual experience of these mariners and these sailors as they were crossing the ocean and as they were out in the thick of it, it gave me a greater appreciation for what the ecosystem of the ocean actually is. Me being a dirty landlocked landlubber, you could forgive me for thinking that it's just water and that's it, and occasionally a fish will come up to your boat. But they got used to being able to see through the water at different angles, and they could recognize based on shadows and stuff like, oh, this is this kind of fish, or this is a school of this kind of fish, or this is a shark coming up at us at this depth, and what their food was. Yes, they had to fish while they were out there, but based on where they were and the time of year they regularly got hit by schools of flying fish, and it was easy for them to just catch flying fish and eat that for a large part of their diet. They also discovered that there is a such thing as flying squid. They weren't overly large, it was the baby squid, but they could get airborne. They were plucking little squidlings and flying fish off of the roof of their raft throughout the voyage. They had to deal with storms, and they had to deal with occasionally losing things when they got hit by rogue waves and stuff. The night watch guy always had to be tied off because this was a raft and not really a vessel that they could sail. There was really the danger of a man going overboard and them not being able to get him back. And in fact, at one point in the voyage, they did lose a guy. They were able to recover him, but that really took the metaphorical wind out of their sails as far as like their atmosphere for the rest of the night. Like their levity was gone, their humor was gone. They were really stuck thinking about how poorly that could have ended and what that would have meant for the rest of their voyage if they had lost a man. This was just a fantastic book. I couldn't tell you how many pages it is, but it's a very worthwhile read. I gave it 4 stars. I didn't feel like it was quite up to 5. I think them actually doing the voyage was a 5-star effort. I think the book was it was pretty good with its pacing and with the information that it dealt out. And Thor Heyerdahl's prose is very immersive, which is always a high selling point, a great quality for a book like this. It just made me appreciate the modern conveniences and comforts that I enjoy, and realizing that this was all built on the back of a world that once had to do without them, and yet people still managed to accomplish incredible things for hundreds and thousands of years. So go ahead and read KON-TIKI by Thor Heyerdahl. It's a true story of a bunch of Norwegians in the 40s who decided to build a raft and cross the Pacific, and by golly, they did it. No content warning or anything. There's no language or sensuality. It's not dry because it happens out in the ocean. There's obviously just a lot of fact-based observations in this, and yet it flows for the most part like any novel account of such an event. I think you guys are really going to like this one. But pick up a copy. Your library will probably have it. I do believe there was even a film version that I saw when I was looking up the book, but I couldn't tell you who's in it, and I haven't seen it. but I might go check it out now that I've read this. But go ahead and read it. Let me know what you think. Hey, thank you for watching that. Did you know that I'm also an author? You can check the description for a link to my book, Mr. Friday. It's set in a future where Black Friday is militarized and televised, and the best Friday fighters end up getting sponsors and backing. But it just so happens that the very best of them actually wants to take the holiday down. When he's approached by a couple of other like-minded fighters, he jumps at the chance, and it goes haywire from there. This is a short novella, and it's available in ebook format for just 99 cents. Drive safe. See you out there.